Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give everyone a moment to file in. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's presentation, A Staged Approach to Achieving Operational Readiness. My name is Jonathan Driscoll. I'm the Marketing Manager with Connects. Just a couple things to go over today. In the handout section of GoToWebinar, you will find a copy of today's presentation, as well as other materials relating to the presentation and some information about our upcoming events. Additionally, at the end of the presentation, we'll have time for a brief discussion, and at that time we can address any comments or questions that you may have. Should you have any questions or comments that arise during the presentation, feel free to enter those either in the questions tab or the chat tab of GoToWebinar. Similarly, if you have any technical issues, you can mention those in the chat tab and we'll do our best to assist you, or call GoToWebinar directly at 888-646-0014. Just a couple items of note. We want to let you know about our upcoming conference, Laboratory University, which will be taking place both virtually and live in San Diego from June 22nd to the 24th. This is a great one-stop shop for those interested in analytical procedures and methods validation, laboratory data integrity, as well as stability testing and program management. Following today's presentation, you'll receive a discount code. Should you be interested in registering, you can check out this and all of our other events at connects.org. Again, I am Jonathan Driscoll, the Marketing Manager with Connects. Connects is a leading educational partner showcasing innovative processes and technology for the GMP and validation environments. As you can see here, and will also be included in the handout section, is a calendar of our upcoming events. In addition to Laboratory University, we have other great learning opportunities coming up, such as our virtual training next week on change control, which you can also check out on our website. We'd also like to take a moment this morning and just recognize our partnership with Temple University's School of Pharmacy, specifically their Regulatory Affairs and Quality Assurance graduate program. In partnering with this program, we've been able to raise quite a bit of funds specifically to donate to that program over the years. And we also offer the ability for students in that program to earn credit unit hours by attending any of our virtual or in-person conferences. So if you know any prospective students or would just like to find out more about how you can help out, certainly visit Temple University's website as well. We also want to take a moment to recognize today's presenting sponsor, CAI. CAI is a global partner providing professional services to enhance operational performance and reliability. When you look at their services, it's clear that they bring extensive experience, detailed knowledge, and an extreme can-do attitude to everything that they do, not only from the early stages of projects, but also to the decommissioning of a facility. And this is important because their clients demand technical and project management expertise, attention to detail, tenacity, innovation, and responsiveness to meet a wide range of requirements and overcome a broad range of contingencies. And they deliver on all of these consistently, expertly, and completely. So if you'd like to check them out, you can visit their website as well at caagents.com. I'd now like to introduce our presenter for today, Harry Benson, the Director for Human Performance at CAI. And without further ado, Harry, I'd like to turn the presentation over to you for today. I'll give you the screen sharing capabilities while you get started.
Great. Thank you, Jonathan. Let's get the screen going. And I believe we are live. Is that correct?
Yep, everything looks good on my end.
Wonderful. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to cover a topic that I'm certainly passionate about, and I hope you share that passion. It's operational readiness, and it's really the second in our series. Part one was defining operational readiness and giving you a general approach that made sense for achieving it. this is part 2, and part 2 expounds upon that and focuses on a staged approach to achieving operational readiness. And I want to be clear, if you didn't attend phase 1 or part 1, it's okay. We're going to do a brief review for everyone's refresher, including my own, of some of the definitions and the purpose, really the problem statement. And then we'll dive into the staged approach. So that'll help both those who did attend and those who have not attended yet. So with that, first of all, the objective is output. Right? Let's keep that in mind. It's easy to get caught up in a capital project and forget that the end goal is not completion of the project. Right? A milestone is completion of the project on time, on budget, all that good stuff, so that your startup is achieved at the right time and sequence. But if post-startup is not achieving the output objective, then the project mode may not have been as successful as you like. In fact, we're seeing on average somewhere between a year or two before we can really, many sites hit production volumes at sustainable costs and quality per the business case. And I think we can all agree that that's not acceptable. It's not certainly what the plan is all about. So how do we bridge that gap? And in fact, I would argue that it's not a bridge. It should be a continuum. So if you look at the bottom of the diagram here, oops, where's my mouse? Sorry, having trouble getting my mouse to work here. There we go. So you look at the bottom of the diagram here. There's a continuum right in from concept and design through construction, testing, and startup into operations, and it should be a continuum. And that's the right way to approach operational readiness. And your two alternatives, although there's plenty of in between there, the preferred state is the blue curve, right? As vertical as possible to startup, meaning startup went as planned, on time and quickly. And post startup, you're achieving your targeted product production and release at the consistent high quality and the sustainable costs as predicted. Instead, what we often see is the orange curve, and that's the problem statement here. Let's talk about why that not operationally ready occurs so much. But before we do, let me ask you a polling question, because this is going to kind of frame some of the challenges. At your site and in your experience, this is a poll question for your input. This isn't some kind of quiz or something. What is the estimated cost of a 2-month delay in batch production or release? So Jonathan, can we bring up the polling question?
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and launch that now. All right, and we'll give everyone a minute or so to input their answers. Okay, so far, so good. We'll give it just another moment.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so it looks like we've got a good sample here. Let me close the poll and we can talk about these results. So what we're seeing here is 46% of our respondents answered B, 20,000 to 100,000. 31% answered 100,000 to 500,000, and then the remaining 23% answered E, more than $1 million.
Okay, so it's fair to say there's a significant risk, right? Now this is in financial terms. Obviously, the risks are greater than just financial. They're risk to market demand, risk to patients getting their critical therapies, et cetera, right? So I certainly don't want to diminish that, but when you look at the when you decide to make trade-offs with regard to your investment in operational readiness, it's important to at least look at the numbers from a financial standpoint and see where the case is logical. Right? And all we're talking about here is a 2-month delay in production or release. And we've all experienced that, or most of us have experienced that in some form or another. A delayed production, delayed startup, lost batches, which might actually be another number much higher in some cases, or just batches mired in deviations and so forth and unable to be released because of quality or issues that occurred, post startup. So we'll come back to that in just a minute, but let's get back to the problem statement. Again, as part of our review, essentially we want the left curve, right? The left curve is ideal. We've got vertical startup as quickly as possible, hitting market demand with our production and release in a sustainable way. The right curve is your startup was delayed, it's extended, extra engineering runs, extra extra change controls and changes and so forth that you have to deal with, and all because of these bar graphs. These bar graphs are orange on this side of the startup, and they're blue on this side of the startup to, correlate with the curves. And really one way to look at it is, if it's post-startup, there are issues. There are issues that prevent you from hitting your stride post-startup, right? Whereas if you identify them early, they're really risks if you run them to ground prior to startup. And there are going to be problems. You have a process for producing this material, right? And this process is tech transfer, et cetera, has come in, and you have to take that process and apply it to your plant with procedures that people can use. The 3 Ps: plant, procedures, and people. There are known risks, right? And most of us have experienced those risks in some form or another, in various ways, right? So this gets into how we're going to approach this problem a little bit, but I think it's important to identify that these are the same issues that will become issues post-startup if we don't run them to ground. And we can do that, but it requires deliberate investment. And that's the staged approach I want to talk about. The second polling question, and by the way, there's only 3, so I don't want to feel like you're being badgered here, but if we can put up another polling question, and this one is really there are 5 operational areas listed here. There are more, certainly, but these 5 operational areas, of these, which one leads to the highest volume of operational issues for you in your experience, either at your current site or across your career? You can answer it either way.
Okay, we do have that pull up, so we'll give everyone a minute here to put in their answers.
And like the first one, there isn't a right answer. I mean, it goes without saying. It could be any of these, and it varies site to site, and process to process.
So we'll give it just a few more seconds. There's still a couple of votes coming in, it looks like.
Okay.
All right. Getting a pretty good response rate here. So let's close it out there, and going through our results, it looks like we have 47% answering processes, workflows, or organizational systems.
Okay.
29% responding with staff performance, human error. 18% going to material availability, staging, and handling. And the remaining 6% answered quality control, micro, and sampling.
Okay. Not too surprising, because option A is a big category, and let's face it, the challenge of organizational systems, right, and then the process and the workflows themselves, right, often lead to some of these other problems like documentation issues, staff, human error, proper staging, and so forth. And I'm glad that tended to be the thinking, although some of the issues are certainly much more specific, right? So let's dive into the next section. So in part 1, Rich Tree was the speaker, and he introduced this general path for operational readiness. And you'll notice that the general path includes, My mouse takes a while. Forgive me for that. You're trying to achieve operational readiness. And then following that, when you're at that sustainable blue curve at the right level, maybe have some hiccups. This is where continuous improvement, operational excellence takes over. You know, a cycle of value stream mapping and continuous improvement, maybe some lean practices, et cetera, right? Great approach, but you got to get here first. You got to get to the stoplight first. Step one, very clearly, and aligned with one of the largest response on the last poll, is organizational systems, right? And that includes communication, accountability, the plan itself, all of that. The only way to get that right is to first set clear direction and have all of leadership aligned to what that direction is, how we're going to measure success. Then you provide that in a very visible way throughout the organization so everybody is rowing in the same direction. Without that, the rest is just a scramble, right? And a scramble is not a good plan for achieving operational readiness. Some of the things you might consider are these, right? For visible goals, it might be something like this, right? We're going to produce X lots per month. We're going to hit this objective of X number of days to release, post-production. And those would be those, scoreboard goals that everybody would look at and strive for and row toward. So everything that everybody's working toward should be toward that. For instance, if this is your major goal. And it might include, in an operational readiness scenario, a timeline, right? By this date, we'll hit that many lots per month and that many days to release, right? Which that date should be startup, right? Post PPQ. Are those goals very visible? Are they clearly defined? Are they visible to the whole organization? And are they tracked so that people can see what the score is at any given time? That's underappreciated sometimes. And it does inspire focus, good prioritized decision making, and just inspires the effective workforce. So that's enough about that, but you can't be overstated. So now let's get to the method. What's the staged approach we're talking about? Well, what you're going to try to do is hit this blue curve, right? We want to hit that blue curve in Strive post startup. And that requires the process to be executed within the plant using the procedures by people, right? Now, the only way to get that blue curve right is to look at all those potential issues as risks early on. The fact is, we know what most of those are. Now, you might say, well, you don't know my process, but we collectively, as an industry, we know from experience, from our collective knowledge, what those issues are going to be. We know what the risks are. We may not know precisely everything to do with your specific new process, but that's okay because we're using very similar facilities, equipment, systems, materials that we've used in the past. We're using procedures that are aligned with those systems and equipment and materials that have been used in the past. And we're all a lot of the same people, although we're going to inject new staff that is new to the industry. That happens. But there's a way to get ahead of these issues. The first, and we recommend, rather than one person or a set of high-level directors only being responsible for figuring out what all the risks are, that's not the best plan. The best plan is a work stream approach. Break it into chunks, just like any other project, chunks that are manageable by folks with the expertise and experience and the focus. Even if you do have all that expertise and experience at the top level, you also need to be able to focus on the work streams. And that's one of the keys. So you have to break this apart. What do I mean by work streams? Here are some of the work streams you might consider. Some of them, for convenience, are combined. Ops and EHS might fall together, might not. QA and regulatory really are two separate work streams. There's no question. But you see the point. These work streams have to be run to ground. We have to figure out what all the issues are going to be in the form of risks. and get our site ready within each of those work streams. And if you don't break them down into work streams, you run the risk of being overtasked, any given individual or team or whatever, because they're not focused on a specific plan of action. This gets back to the investment. When we talked about the amount of loss to a 2-month delay in batch compared to the extra get ahead of it cost of having workstream owners responsible for each of these work streams with the experience to do so, you might look at that, some might look at that cost of hiring that kind of staff and dedicating them in a focused way to a work stream as a burden and as an unplanned for cost, which of course it should be planned for. The challenge, of course, is that if you don't do that, you run the risk of those delayed batches that cost the kind of numbers that you referred to, and those were probably conservative. So, poll question 3, this is the last one. I appreciate your input to this. In your experience at your site or your experience, which of these 5 work streams that support the output that we're looking for represent the most post-startup operational issues? This isn't all the work streams, obviously. I selected these just because these are common work streams that might not get the focus, the dedicated focus that they need for work stream plan ownership.
We'll give everyone some time to fill that in, but we do have some answers coming in so far.
Okay. And by the way, you might call some of these work streams different terms. You'll have to forgive that. I'm sure you can use equivalents in your mind.
Okay, just a couple more seconds in case anyone has a last minute response they'd like to put in. All right, and we're going to close it there.
All right.
So in terms of our results, it looks like we had 18% answering manufacturing science or tech transfer.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like our leader was facility and equipment at 35%. Coming up just behind that was engineering, validation, and maintenance at 29%.
Yeah, that's a big category, and it's hard to, we'd have to carve that out more, but yep.
IT and automation at 12%, and then just 6% for supply chain.
Okay, interesting. All right, well, thanks for that data. Appreciate it. So now that we've established work streams, what do we do with those work streams? I've already referred to it a little bit, but the next step is this approach within each work stream. So you have to have that work stream lead, right? There's got to be a team led by a leader who's focused on each of the work streams that you've identified for your particular process. And the first step of this is the operational risk assessment, or the and creation of a risk register, right? It's hard to create an action plan of any logic if you haven't done this. So take a minute to look at this. This is I'm going to give you about 2 minutes, and I want you to digest this big eye chart. Actually, it's probably best called a periodic table, because it is what we refer to as some of the elements under each work stream, right? You might break them out differently. This is just a model for you to consider, and it's one that we use. Within each of the work streams, which are shown across the top in dark blue, trying to get that mouse back again. Across the top are the various work streams, and there are elements under each work stream that I'm still struggling to get my mouse. There it is. Under each vertical are the elements that you might assess in an operational readiness assessment, or a risk assessment for each of these, right? Again, you might break them out differently. Some of these elements might lay out in different places depending on your organization and your process, and that's fine, but you get the general gist. And you should challenge yourself as to whether or not all of these things are aligned and ready to go prior to startup. And how do you do that? Well, you first define excellence within each of those work streams and each of the elements of those work streams. And you assess your current state against each, and that's where you develop the risk register. Now you might say, well, that's easier said than done. That would take a long time to develop. And yeah, but you want to use, that's why you have to have experienced people focused in those work streams that know what those areas are, those categories and elements are that you're going to have to run to ground, right? That represent risk. And then you can prioritize them. And the way you prioritize them is now that you have the risk register, then you conduct some level of solution workshop is what we call them, where after the assessment, you figure out what your prioritized action plan is based on risk. The general output might look something like this. Here's an example for supply chain, right? All these categories or elements associated with supply chain in this particular site might be doing okay with regard to some of the regulatory elements of supply chain and the quality elements of supply chain. It might be falling a little short when it comes to the execution, if this applies to that particular site. Let me dive into one to give you a sense of what. Oops. Oh, goodness sakes. I did not see that coming. That's never happened to me, Jonathan. I'm not sure why this did this. Forgive me a minute. I will get to it. Goodness. Grant access. Okay, there it is. All right, here we go. Sorry about that. So in this case, we're looking at an Excel spreadsheet. This is just our model. You can, whatever model works for you. And here are the categories we already saw, those elements of, in this case, under the category of information systems, all right, IT and automation, right? Here are some of the things that, that would show up on a summary table. Now, each of these summary line items is made up of more detailed subcategories, right? So under digital strategy, there's a whole set of categories, subcategories, and likewise with data integrity by design and CSV, et cetera. Right? And then within each of those subcategories, there are detailed elements and scoring methods, right? Of what's good, what's mediocre and acceptable, what's falling short, right? And this is an example of a set of standards that's already set as to what excellence is, right? Here's the data integrity tab, there's a CSV tab or whatever. This is our approach. You may have a different approach, but it's back to the point of setting what your definition of excellence is. Not all of those items are going to apply to every site, every process, whatever, that's okay, but you've got a set of standards that you're working from. Likewise, development and MS&T, and I'm going to have to go through the same little exercises, I guess. There it is. And you'll have the similar layout, similar diagram, set of categories. You got your programs. For each program, there's subcategories, and you can look at the actual elements under each of the subcategories and give them a score or however you choose to assess. All right. So this approach serves you well when it comes to assessing your current state and developing a risk register. So now you've got a set of risks. You prioritize them by putting some best heads together who are knowledgeable of this subject into a prioritized action plan. So what does that action plan and the associated schedule look like? Let's take a look at something. So here's an example of and here we're using a tool called Miro. I won't spend any time on it, but it's a good collaborative tool that you might find useful for your organization, especially as things are remote. So in this case, this was a manufacturing readiness action table, all right? Now, it's a detailed action table, exactly what's going to happen in each of these. And these top two were green items. They were priority A. Yellow were priority B, and then white was priority C or later, right? And that's fine. And there's detail behind it. And you saw from the topics, there's kind of a risk assessment standpoint, scoring method, owner and sponsorship, as well as the kind of support you might need and the metrics of success, right? Once you have that, now you have a work stream plan. And this might be just a high level milestone of what a work stream plan might look like. Here are the things that we're going to accomplish over time, and there'd be a timeline across the top. Right? And that's good. It's not everything, but that's good. That's the next step. Notice there was a timeline across the top to give you a sense of schedule. The next piece is the focused ownership. Getting focused ownership is easier said than done, right? Because we're all busy and we all get clobbered with new priorities amidst our standard plan. That's where a different approach might help. This approach can help in a big way, and you need to give this some consideration. Again, a little bit of front-end investment goes a long way to prevent the output being less than ideal and very costly. First of all, goal clarity, we talked about that. Then you got a prioritized action plan for each work stream. Talked about that as well, great. We can jump right into focused ownership, except we got all these reactive needs pulling us away from our focus. If I had to put my finger on one thing at the sites that I've spent time on, and as well as the ones that I continue to investigate and collaborate on, it's this. The people who were responsible for identifying and running to ground those potential issues that are now in the form of risk can't stick with the plan because they just don't have time. We haven't made the investment to give them the focus they need. Sometimes it's a matter of authority and process. Sometimes it's a matter of resources. Often it's just time, right? All of those need to come together to give those work stream owners, who eventually will likely be your system owners in your system, in your process. You need to give them that focus. And one of the tools is this off-ramp. And we propose a model with tiger teams, right? Individuals who are troubleshooters, they know enough about the process and the plant and the people and the procedures that they can run to ground these issues. They might not be an expert in all things, but that's okay. We can hand things off to them that come up in a reactive way that need to be addressed so that these workstream owners can focus. That's an investment. It's a deliberate investment in people and expertise, or experience at least. Where else are you running? At the 11th hour, I can tell you one of the things we see the most is that SOPs and the associated training, as well as batch record changes or batch record authorship in the first place, is done at the 11th hour. And why is that? It's because the people that were assigned to, or at least in theory assigned to do this, don't get the focus time to do it. So once again, you need to take a similar approach, just like you are with the workstream owners. So that helps you with the ownership piece. And now you have a risk register with an action plan with schedule and ownership. Next, remember, that's only one work stream though. Every one of those work streams has some dependencies. So let's look at that. So here is a pile of work stream milestones, right? And it's not all the work streams, but this is an example, right? So if all these work streams have a set of milestones that they have to accomplish, who's making sure that all the interdependence of these is being addressed? Because it's very common that anyone on any work stream owner or staff working on the work stream has some blinders on because they're trying to finish their job. Makes sense. And they aren't necessarily looking at the dependencies of the other to and from the other work streams. So stacking them is nice from a visual standpoint, but it really doesn't solve anything, because this timeline isn't real, because the interdependencies stretch out the timeline by nature. So you need to go work the integrated plan. So how do you go about doing that? Well, remember this little diagram. I guess I can go back to it either way. So here we are, this single work stream diagram of some of the things, and it's not everything, but these are some of the things that we're going to run to ground before startup, right? Every one of these, I assure you, has a dependency on some other work stream, if not multiple, right? Whether it be, so this is manufacturing's action plan, but it's very dependent on quality. It's very dependent upon QC. It's very, in micro, it's very dependent on engineering and on supply chain. So we take this stack of workstream action plans and we integrate it. Another workshop, well facilitated, would create an integrated master plan for readiness. And across each work stream, we have, in an integrated way, addressed where the dependencies are and phased things properly across the timeline. And it should include all kinds of work streams, including QC, supply chain, warehouse, IT and automation, engineering, etc. Taking that approach will lead to a more integrated plan with regard to your operational readiness, and it gives you a realistic time frame, not a dreamy time frame, if you will. All right? And it does tear down silos of execution as well, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, once again, we have a process, right? This process needs the plant, it needs procedures, and it needs people to execute the output to the desired level, right? So the first part we covered was the plant, getting that integrated plan. We also have procedures. And one of the things that I suggest is you put some dedication to the procedure development. And one of the tools that we like to use when looking at your procedures is aligning the procedures to the process. And you have to do it in a visual, deliberate way, or else you'll find gaps after startup. For instance, in this case, we've mapped out the process to the left. We've got SOPs and batch records, so all your documentation should be aligned, which we'll look at. And then, how long do they take, and what are some critical time parameters, as well as, how many operators or technicians or what have you, what kind of staff is needed for that step. In this case, we got a missing SOP. We might have a procedure that's a little bit out of sync in the batch record from the process, so we need to address that issue if it is one, right? It's a potential issue. And another potential issue is too many SOPs within a certain step that might make it challenging for an individual to perform, right? Or maybe this one person who's assigned to this operation, maybe that's not appropriate and it should be 2 or 3 people, right? These are the things that you work through when you take this kind of approach to aligning your process with your procedures. Of course, the next step is make sure the people that you've identified actually are appropriately aligned to the process. So here we have a timeline for this process, and you see the people who have to perform the process and all the process steps according to each process. So whether it be parts washing, setup, filling and inspection, what have you, right? And QA disposition, etc. All of that requires individuals. Now, this is truncated a bit. You probably need more people than this, but for any given process, you need to identify how many people and who's doing what when. That aligns the process to the people. And of course, there's activities associated with each of these, and this should be cross-functional, right? Not just operators. It needs to be the integrated staff. From there, you can build a staffing plan. Now, I would argue you need to start the staffing plan well prior to that, because someone's got to lay out that process the way I just showed you. And that's going to be these people. So early in your staffing plan should be the hiring of these people. And who are they? They're your work stream leads we talked about earlier. They're your work stream owners, system owners, etc. The people who already have the experience to figure out those blue bars before they become yellow bars or orange, whatever that color was. So those people need to be early in your hiring process. And eventually they become your system owners, your process engineers for run mode anyway. So it's not like you're wasting dollars and bringing them on early. You just have to plan it that way, because they do prevent the costs that we already identified early in that first poll. The other group that I strongly recommend you give some thought to is that Tiger team we talked about. The scale of which is going to depend on your process and your plant. It goes without saying. But engineers, technicians, QC, the people that can run these issues to ground that come up suddenly, right? Some supply chain guru, whatever. People like that can run those problems to ground and take the burden off of these people from trying to solve every problem that comes their way. The other role that I give a lot of credence to is the planner, facilitator, and scheduler. That person that can harmonize those people into a integrated readiness plan, right? That integrated plan takes skill to build. And they don't have to be subject matter experts. They need to be master facilitators, right? But it helps to have some experience, obviously. They can also become your scheduler. not just, and this might come out of your PMO, your project management office, might come out of other departments or whatever, or it might be a new role that you haven't considered, but give it some thought. And they might become your scheduler if they have that skill and become a production scheduler, project scheduler, et cetera. So again, bringing them on early makes a lot of sense, and it's an investment worth the returns. So now you've got an integrated master plan. The last step, which gets beat to death, but the actions typically aren't clear. We got to communicate, we got to hold each other accountable. Now, one of the key elements of this whole plan is that ownership piece I talked about in the Tiger team, or the off-ramp for the sudden needs. If that's in place, you can make this work, and people won't get distracted from their plans, and they can be held accountable. But the best way to do that is a very structured way, right? Here's a method that we find useful. It's the stand-up meeting that's cascaded throughout the organization, right? From the site level all the way through departments and down and work streams down to the shift or team level, right? So coming down the cascade would be goals, changes, et cetera, that unforeseen circumstances at the facility level, that kind of stuff. And going up are the risks to the plan, the status of things, right? And if these are done regularly with a cadence and using things like visual management boards that are very simple, don't go crazy with them, then you can make a big difference. And let's talk about what those meetings look like. So the communication tool, really, if you do it right, where it becomes a cadence that then becomes culture. And when it becomes cultural, you're in run mode. You're ready for run mode. So some of the structure and the rules around a good cadence of communication. First of all, you use that cascading method at every level of the site. I strongly recommend I call them stand-up meetings. We call them stand-up meetings because they're not meant to have donuts and be comfortable, right? This is 15, 20 minutes. Get to the point, look at the board, red, yellow, or green. How are we doing? What's the problem? Where are we stuck? Let's run it to ground, right? That's it. And communicate well across the cross-functional, small functional cells, right? This one's key. I won't spend too much time on it. It's a human element, but ultimately, when it becomes cultural, you've got small teams who are very trusting of each other. I can challenge you, you can challenge me, and there's no hard feelings, no backpedaling, and no baggage or defensiveness, right? We don't judge, we simply look at facts, and we raise possibilities and issues. And this isn't positioning. This isn't an interview for the job you already have. This is this is telling it like it is and what the plan is to get things to stay on plan, right? What's the agenda look like? Celebrate a win. This is an example, right? This is the way I like to do a stand-up meeting. Let's celebrate something positive. Let's start with that. Something that went well, something we overcame, something we did well together, recognize somebody, what have you. Have a safety minute. It's always good. And then what's the score? Where do we stand against the goal in a big way? Following that, what's our priority based on that for the shift or for the day or the period of time or whatever? And then where are we stuck? Now, where are we stuck is a big one, because if you don't deal with those things, all you're doing is having meetings for the sake of status meetings, and that's not helpful. Where are we stuck? What's red? What's yellow? What's risk? Put those risks on the table, and here are your 4 options for those risks. Once you've identified it, you either hope and move on, which I would argue is not a good option, but unfortunately that happens a lot. Resolve and decide in the meeting how it's going to get resolved. Third option, assign it to a team member who's there in the room or in the stand-up meeting, because if it's not someone there, accountability is tough, right? And then finally, the other option is send it to the Tiger team. If it's an urgent need or something that's going to derail us from our plan, that's a good application for the Tiger team. Ultimately, the output objective is what we're striving for. We're striving for that blue curve, which only happens because we ran these risks through the ringer prior to startup, before they become issues post-startup. And that's the ins and outs of operational readiness. Physical plant, procedures, and people bring you your targeted yields, production, and release in a consistent way with consistent high quality and sustainable costs. that's all I have from a presentation standpoint. Jonathan, do we want to open up for discussion?
This would be a great time to get everything opened up for discussion. At this point, I don't see anything yet, but if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to address, feel free to enter those either in the questions or chat tabs, and we'll go for those. We'll give everyone a minute or so to enter something in if anything comes to mind.
All right, thank you. Quiet group?
Yeah, it seems so. Nothing so far.
Okay, that's fine.
Give it one more moment. If not, again, you can always follow up with questions if something should come to mind at a later date, either directly with Harry or you can also contact us at info@connects.org and we'd be happy to follow up for you.
Great.
All right, so still doesn't look like anything's coming in, so I'll go ahead and get us started on wrapping up here.
All right, thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you. So I just want to take this moment, of course, to thank Harry for a wonderful presentation today on a staged approach to achieving operational readiness. Great presentation. I know I learned a lot. I also just want to give a brief reminder to check us out at Lab University, which will be coming up shortly, just at the end of June. It'll be an exciting opportunity for those that can travel to get back to, probably a small group gathering in person, get to see people face to face. And of course, I also want to take time to thank today's presenting sponsor, CAI, for being a wonderful partner for Connects. Lastly, just a couple housekeeping items. Again, you will receive a copy of the slide deck presentation from today, as well as access to the recording for up to 2 weeks in a follow-up email that you'll receive. Additionally, if anyone is willing to stay on for a few moments after the presentation ends, there will be just a very brief few question survey just to give us some feedback on today's presentation. We'd greatly appreciate if you could take the time to complete that for us. Additionally, you can check us out at connects.org for any additional upcoming events, as well as the calendar in the handouts tab. And you can check out CAI's website at cagents.com. So with that, I think that's a good place to wrap up for today. Thank you again, Harry, and everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Take care.